public hearing to order.
Oh, thanks.
The City of Belton will hold a public hearing on the proposed annual budget for the fiscal year beginning on April 1st, 2024 and ending on March 31st, 2025. If anybody would like to speak for or against anything in the budget, come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and state what you want to state. Yeah, not everybody at once. How long do I gotta leave this open?
We're at 30 seconds now. Take a drink of your Sprite.
I can do that.
There's no legal requirement for how long it has to be open.
Ask a question. Is that allowed?
You're not public. Well, at this point, we're just having an opportunity.
Your question has to come later.
Yeah, at this point, we are giving the public the opportunity to make statements and ask for actions from the
But later I
city
can ask a
council.
question about the public hearing.
Yes,
not
you
about
can.
the budget, but about the public
Yes.
hearing. Okay.
All right, hearing none, public hearing will adjourn. Call meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance, Councilmember Powell.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, I would like to take a moment of silence for the City of Independence, Officer Cody Allen, and Process Server Drexel Mack and their families for the line of duty deaths that they've had. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Member White,
Here.
Howell,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Kraft,
Here.
McCallum,
Here.
Lawson,
Here.
and Richardson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Personal appearances, Belton High School Youth Forum presentation. Don't all jump up at once.
You guys know he won't give you long. Has to be one go-getter.
You need a microphone? Yeah. You can face that way. You can face that way. He's got a mic. Andrew's bringing you a microphone too.
Who's talking?
Who's talking first?
We are the Belton High School Youth Forum, and this year we did a conference where we talked to significant figures in the community about problems we had, and we're going to tell you about that today. I am Gabe Clutter. I was on there and I spoke about the process we used to come up with what we had to say. And we didn't only come up with problems, but we also came up with solutions we had. And we will tell you about a few of those solutions.
Yeah, I'm Violet. I joined Youth Forum because I saw people in my school and in my community that just needed some more support, and I thought there were some ways that we could do that. Here.
I'm Shamay, and I'm pretty much on the youth forum for the same thing as Violet. I've seen people in my community struggling and needing more support, so I wanted to help with that.
I'm Lilith. As stated before me, we see struggle, we see people in our community and around us struggling, dying, and we want to do something to help it, to stop everything.
I'm Lillian Burnham. I joined Youth Forum because I wanted to give better opportunities to the younger like the people after us, you know. Just wanted them to have more outlets to be able to talk to people that if they need it and have, I don't know, just more people to reach out to, I guess.
So, one thing that I saw a lot of in the community was, and I'm not trying to blame anyone, but I think all of us together, we could all be more willing to listen to each other, because I think there is a bit of a, I guess you would call it a stigma between adults and kids, and it goes both ways. I'm not just saying it goes one way. And both parties generally tend to not listen to the other because of pre-established relationships and things like that. And I joined Youth Forum because I want to fix that, and I want to help us all be able to work together. And I think this is a really good start on one way to do that.
Yeah, another problem is like substance use. So a lot of people, they might just need like a positive influence and a place where they can hang out. So that was something we thought about having a solution for. Could be like having a building where people can hang out, and it's a safe space for youth to do positive activities after school hours and stuff.
You're okay. A main issue that I've seen is a lot of students and just younger adults and all sorts of things not knowing where these resources are even available, not knowing that we even have most of the resources we do. Because I'm going to be entirely honest, I didn't know about 90% of the resources that Belton has until the Youth Forum, until we were discussing every possible thing. Anything like that?
I know one solution we talked about was putting in, like, I'm trying to figure out how to say it. It's like one universal link, and it has every resource that, like, you would need on there. Like, there's the crisis helpline, the Think Now, First Call. What else was it?
Can't remember the exact, but yeah, like, I know what you mean, because we were playing for a billboard.
There's a bunch of others. I just can't think of any. I'm sorry.
Yeah, definitely information is a big thing too. Making sure that kids know where they can go for help and that they can access those resources that are available, but they just don't know. So, thank you guys.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Item H, new business. 1, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2024-11.
An ordinance approving an amended and restated intergovernmental cooperative agreement between the City of Belton, Missouri and the Belton-Cass Regional Transportation Development District, and authorizing the mayor to execute the same on behalf of the City of Belton, Missouri.
Present. Second.
A motion is second. You're up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of council. Before you tonight is an amended and restated cooperative agreement between the City of Belton and the Belton-Cass Regional TDD. For background, the Belton-Cass Regional TDD was formed over a decade ago. It is what I would classify as a truly regional TDD. It was formed by Cass County, Mount Pleasant Special Road District, and the City of Belton to perform and to construct and to fund various projects throughout the city to improve transportation facilities. As you will note in the whereas clauses of both the ordinance and the amended and restated cooperative agreement, The agreement was amended multiple times due to changes to pricing, due to changes to which projects would occur when, and to specifically lay out what the actual end dollar figures were regarding those projects. Due to this kind of almost every other year process of amending the existing agreement, it became cumbersome and, to be honest, somewhat ambiguous as to what exactly was going on, who exactly was paying what, when, what project was actually going to occur, how it would be funded, so on and so forth. Due to that, legal counsel for the TDD, Bill Moore from Rouse, Fretz, Gentile, and Rhodes, proposed that we amend and restate the agreement, which basically means you take all of the amendments that have already occurred and the proposed amendment for the newest phase of Markey or Cambridge, and turn that into one stated agreement, restated agreement combined together to specifically lay out what everything means and why everybody is doing what occurs. Due to this being a cooperative agreement between another political subdivision, it does require an ordinance for passage and approval by the city council. And I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I'll just make a statement that as the council's representative to the TDD, I've read that 2 or 3 times, and there's no problem with it. I think it improves the language. And if you read it closely, you even see my signature there someplace. So you can still vote against it, but
It was crossed out over somebody else's, I saw.
yeah. Well.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Would this require a double read tonight?
A double read could occur as there is funding, there is current projects under construction that do have city obligated or do have city money behind, mainly the professional services portion of those projects. But one I do not think is necessary if the city council does not want to do a double read tonight. But I would again note, all we are doing is taking what has basically already been approved by this city council repeatedly over the past decade and just putting it into one document instead of 10 documents.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. Any discussion?
While sorry,
Any discussion on the motion to do a second reading?
yes.
Go ahead.
While I completely understand that, as you explained, there's not a big, this isn't a big change or anything new, I'm all for doing a second reading at a later date just to keep us from doing second readings over and over the same meeting just because we can. So that's my 2 cents on that, and I would oppose it.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Motion carries. Motion to approve the second reading of Bill 2024-11.
An ordinance approving an amended and restated intergovernmental cooperative agreement between the City of Belton, Missouri and the Belton Cass Regional Transportation Development District, and authorizing the mayor to execute the same on behalf of the City of Belton, Missouri.
Present. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Pryan,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
McCallum,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
and Kraft.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 2, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2024-12. You're up, or, wait a minute.
An ordinance authorizing the waiver of building and development fees for the Cass County Dental Clinic, new construction located at Markey Parkway and Town Center Drive in Belton, Missouri.
Present. Second.
Have a motion and a second. You're up.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this bill is before you this evening as a direct result of the request made at the previous meeting after the presentation during public comment to address the fees that the city charges for building and development. And these fees exist essentially because staff time is spent preparing consulting for inspecting and reviewing projects. And in your council action report, you'll see a lot of what those fees are and the reason that we have those in place. Some of the highlights, I'm not going to go through the entire council action report. There's a lot of information in there. One thing there are a couple things that are pretty important in staff's opinion. One is that this is not something we generally do, okay? We don't waive the fees. In fact, it hasn't happened in well over a decade at least. Even the schools, even the library, both, public entities that have taxing jurisdiction have paid these fees in recent projects. The schools, as recent as 2018, they did a big project where they did some work on the high school, paid about $110,000 worth of fees, did not ask for a waiver. So this is kind of based on our current operating procedures in the code that is adopted by ordinance, which is why this is an ordinance. We have to amend it via ordinance to waive these fees. This would be a precedent-setting measure if we decided to adopt this ordinance tonight. There's that, and I just wanted to point out to council that to be careful when it comes to waiving or to setting precedents like this for specific projects, because at some point, someone who's denied the ability to waive these fees could make an argument that there is some discriminatory nature to the way that the council addresses these things. And although anybody could sue at any time, the last thing we would want as a city is to open ourselves up to potential lawsuits down the line, because we do apply the fees in some instances and we don't in others. Just for thought. With that said, I will be glad to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Comment.
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we look at developing guidelines for before we even start considering this, so that way we can interrupt any type of a variety of people coming in and asking for these, and we can operate by the guidelines that we create.
There's a motion that has been made on the floor.
To restate that motion, is it a motion to continue or a motion to postpone the reading of this ordinance until such time as city staff can prepare for submission to the city council a set of guidelines and procedures relating to when the waiver of fees may occur?
Yes.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second on the motion on the floor that was read by the city attorney. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Currently, there is a staff guideline, or there is a guideline, there is a procedure that's in place. It's the existing code that was adopted by the council. So the code that exists does set the guidelines, which does not allow for exceptions to this. Now, that's not to say we couldn't amend that code, and if that's the council's purview, then we probably ought to workshop it, have a discussion on what types of things we'd want to amend that code with. That just to point out that does exist, and as it exists, there are no exceptions.
Go ahead.
I guess I had some questions and comments about the original motion, so now we are on.
That's a good question.
So yes, the current topic that before the city council is whether or not you want to postpone and ask city staff to prepare guidelines.
Okay.
Now, obviously, postponing something is a pretty broad discussion topic, as are potential guidelines. So there is not insignificant leeway in that. But to also kind of piggyback off what Joe said, just so this is also on the council's mind, whenever a license or fee is adopted by the city council under section 67.042, to ensure that the Hancock Amendment is not being violated by just increasing fees to increase revenues, a statement of the cost necessary to maintain the funding of such service is required. If you all will recall, we've had to do those multiple times when we've increased fees. And while there is no case law or Missouri Attorney General opinion interpreting what a waiver would do when you've made a statement that the only reason why you're increasing fees is because you have to keep paying for a service, there is not insignificant amount of opinions of attorneys that practice in municipal law across the state that the waiver of a fee without some sort of public improvement being constructed by the developer because of that could be determined to violate 67.042 and put the entire fee structure of the city at potential harm, because now we have shown and established that they are not necessary to keep the service running because we just waived them.
Go ahead.
Can you define public improvement?
So one of the things that is typically done is, for example, if the most common one that I have seen, and it has occurred here, is when North Point went in and built Southview Commerce Center, their fees were capped at $200,000 per building, which $200,000 probably does get pretty close to paying for the cost to inspect it. But instead what they did, because they got that waiver, is they improved the water lines and they constructed some of the outer road and paid for that. So instead of it being like what I would call a waiver or a cap, it was instead, you do this, which is more expensive than what you're doing. And that way we can make it so that the waiver is okay. Because other city funds didn't have to go to pay for that, so they can go to pay for the service.
Are you done?
It's a follow-up.
And then the other one, the most common, 100% most common one I've seen is off-site improvements for not multifamily, but for large-scale subdivisions. So, for example, say somebody comes in and wants to build 400 new homes. The building permits on 400 new homes is going to be very expensive. So, specifically in cities that don't have impact fees for roads, you guys do, but the city will negotiate with them to say, we will cap fees because you're building the same home 400 times. We will waive fees because you're building the same home 400 times, whatever. But you need to spend that equal amount that you are saving on making it so that the arterial road that runs to your subdivision is better.
Okay, I have two more questions. Is public improvement narrowly defined as like infrastructure and like a physical asset?
It would have to, so a capital improvement
Okay.
would have to be the physical asset. The public improvement, once we start talking about that, we are in the capital realm.
Okay.
And a public improvement needs to be owned by a political subdivision of the state of Missouri or of the United States.
Perfect, thank you.
So something that is truly something that the public at large can use.
Okay, and then my last question,
Go
I
ahead, you're
think.
fine.
Is there precedent for what Joe is cautioning us about, that is there precedent that, fees were waived in this city for a school district or something similar, and it,
Well, so the school district, so again, discrimination is based on protected class status. The school district, being a school district, is not a protected class. However, the caution that Joe is bringing up, and I share it with him, and him and I have talked about it, is that if you waive fees for certain organizations, non-political subdivision organizations, because we're typically, if any fee caps are occurring there, it's because that's all public funds anyway. So the tax dollars, we're just shifting tax dollars back and forth. We're not really doing all that much. But would be what is called discriminatory impact, because I don't think anybody here is taking this action with discriminatory intent. But discriminatory impact would occur where, say, you grant a waiver to an organization and then you deny the next one. But it turns out that the next one serves a protected class more than the first. And so now you have, in essence, had a discriminatory impact that protected class is no longer, did not receive the same benefit and access to a public activity as the group that provides the act for a non-protected class. So when you look at discriminatory impact and any discrimination when it comes to cities, you will find cases that go down the most wild routes you have ever seen. Yankee Stadium, the Parks Department of New York got sued for Yankee Stadium because it was discriminatory in, I think, location was one of the notes. I don't know. But that is a case that every law professor brings up. We have chiefs sitting behind us, fire chiefs sitting behind us. Beards have been ruled discriminatory and non-discriminatory. So when we start getting into like the realm of what we do, discriminatory impact, you have to be very, very cautious the entire time, because there are a lot of things that have discriminatory impact that you don't think about. I'll give you the biggest example that we have in the United States. It's the Yick-Woo case. It was a case out of San Francisco in 1870, where the city of San Francisco passed an ordinance that laundries could only be in brick buildings. Makes sense because, if it was wood and you're in a laundry and it's 1870, that could burn down. Well, no discriminatory intent there, but turns out that 90% of the non-brick laundries in San Francisco were owned by people of Chinese origin. And that's the seminal case that starts the entire theory. But just to show you how far that road can go.
You good?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So our only option is, because the current rules say we have to say no. And if we want to consider this, that means we have to then go back and look at specific rules and change so that's our only options, really.
I mean, I will say that if this is the route that the city council does want to go, we have to have guidelines in place. Guidelines and those sorts of checks that occur are what stop discrimination lawsuits. But also on top of that, we have to keep in our own minds 67.042.
That's correct.
And so those are both two things that it appears that all of the council is currently considering, but to keep in mind when making this decision.
Go ahead.
When you're speaking of suits, do you have to track the employee time doing permit work?
No, and so again, if you look at like the ones that we have prepared, so there is a significant, you don't have to, it's not like me, I'm an attorney, when I bill somebody by the hour, I have to bill by the 6th of the hour. We're not looking at that. Instead, we can generally understand like how much an employee costs, how many buildings they will inspect, how much their computer costs, how much their health insurance costs, how much it costs to keep the lights on in City Hall, how much water they use, and bring that in. There's no necessity under 67042 to track time.
Okay, but I guess, have there been suits along those lines? I mean, have people said?
But this is one that you never see it this way. You see it the other way, where your fees are too high and somebody threatens you. And there was a case in Oak Grove about 20 years ago, but it's non-reported. And the city of Oak Grove was sued because a developer attempted to say that their fees were too high. There is no case about waiving fees.
Okay.
But the bedrock is kind of a consistent application of fees that are supposed to only be adopted because you're repaying the citizens basically for them having to fund an individual position that is mainly focused on doing something for a small group is kind of the bedrock principle to why the fees don't get kind of waived as much.
Okay.
Just a wild hair, sometimes that's the way I get since I'm old. So if the fees are, let's say, $50,000, and we want to waive them, but it has to be based on some kind of criteria, could we say that they have to do $50,000 worth of dental work for the citizens of Belton?
I mean, at that point, you just got very specific.
Well, I said wild hair.
And so we won't get that specific in the guidelines, because the guidelines are meant to guide decisions for all businesses that would be applying. I would say that something like that is very similar to what occurred with North Point. Now, granted, that was a water line. That wasn't and sidewalks and streets. But, I said public improvement, and Councilmember Lawson, I think, correctly pointed out, I should have used a public purpose as what they would have to accomplish with the fee waiver, but you could do that via contract potentially.
Go ahead.
Are there other incentive possibilities outside of fee waiving that they could possibly apply for to help them fiscally?
So our typical, like our Chapter 100 and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but they are a not-for-profit entity, which means that they are already not subject to ad valorem property taxes, so those two are out the window. And then also, I do not believe that there would be a sales tax applicable to dental services, especially one performed by a not-for-profit. So at this site, there are no incentives available because the entity does not produce tax revenue that is utilized to provide the incentive. If you look at all the incentives that you all agree to and approve, you're not just handing money, you're taking taxes that would be generated by the developer and either abating them or redirecting them.
I understand the motion now is whether to postpone this and work on guidelines, let staff work on guidelines. But I would just say that this is an opportunity for the council to impact some good. Looking at my numbers from last time, they're short about $700,000 now, and this fee being waived would allow them to increase from 4 to 8 operatories. They also go into the schools and do dental checks and fluoride treatments and things for students. So when we have an opportunity to impact something like this, I think it's important. And I'm not sure how this would affect their timeline if we were to go back through and set up some guidelines. But I am very interested in capping fees or making our local nonprofits help them be as successful as possible, because there is a dearth of services in our community and people have a hard time getting help when they need it. And when we've got these organizations ready and willing to provide that help, we don't get a ton of opportunities to do good up here like that. We get a lot of asks from developers, and we've done a lot with the Chapter 353. So I just want to express how open I am to finding a solution that benefits organizations like them.
Mr. Mayor, if I may say a couple
Go ahead.
of follow-ups on this. One, I want to point out that this is not a path that most municipalities take to waive these types of fees unless there's that public improvement that is attached to it. Another is it's a great cause, so this is not going to sound like we're opposed to the cause of this dental clinic, which is obviously not the case, right? It's a wonderful cause. It's just about what precedents we're setting, and we have to look at the next step and why, essentially what happens based on what we do here now in the future. It can be very, empathetic to their fiscal situation. I do want to point out that the opposite of providing a public benefit, by taking this location specifically, they're taking one of the prime commercial locations in the city and taking it off the tax rolls. It's off the property tax rolls. It won't be sales tax generating. So it doesn't just negatively impact the city that this is going to be turning from a prime commercial location to a nonprofit location. It impacts the school district, it impacts the county. And so there is some negative benefit or, some negative effect economically. Also, I don't know how much they paid for this specific piece of land, but I do know that in your council action report, it is pointed out that there are at least 4 other locations that we found throughout the city of Belton that likely would have been cheaper, maybe much cheaper, probably much more than $50,000 cheaper, which is what the fee they're trying to waive, and still gotten the same impact that they're trying to get through, with this type of a development. So, that wasn't the case that we were trying to say. I mean, I still think that the merits of this are the precedents, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we don't go too far down the path of saying, okay, if it's just about economics, well, they could have gotten there economically by being more, at a different location. So let's just make sure that we're all on the same page with that.
All right. Let's come back to the motion, because I think we're going down the other way. But the motion is to postpone and work on a set of guidelines. So let's come back to the motion, if that's what we're going to talk about. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm in favor of the motion, and my thought process here is, even if I disagree with where our guidelines end up, I'll have an opportunity to say that then.
Yes,
So I'm
absolutely.
interested in hearing what we might come up with, so I guess that's where I'm at. It can't hurt to look at it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I am along the same lines of Council Member McCallum, that I want to look into all of our options before we say yes or no, and kind of look at guidelines. And if we just say yes right now, then that does open us up to then other possibilities without having those guidelines in place. I would like guidelines in place before we say yes or before we say no without thinking everything through.
Let's see. I'm not giving a position about where I'm at on the, whether they get the things waived or not. What I'm interested in is finding out, is there guidelines that we could use that could be developed in certain situations, for certain situations, that certain types of nonprofits, whatever that might be, that's going to be helpful to our citizens, have opportunities that will not be given to them because of just because of the situations. So that's why I'm proposing that we look to see, are there options out there to be able to let this happen so that the door just doesn't open and Suits and Barn and everything comes to us.
Go ahead.
I'll just say, I appreciate your role and duty to protect the, best use of different commercial blocks in town. I appreciate and understand your duty to protect us from inviting scrutiny or litigation if something similar comes online and we've painted ourselves in the corner. I get that. I just think that for all the times that a developer has brought us a less than savory option for a location and we kind of say, well, it's acceptable, let's do it. I mean, the same logic applies to me. We don't always get our dream pie in the sky location, and as a nonprofit, they chose that for a reason. So that argument, doesn't hold as much water for me, but I do acknowledge that, you're doing your job here and I appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, one more thing on this specific motion, if I may.
ahead. Go ahead.
Staff will obviously do its due diligence as instructed by the council. So if you instruct us to go back and try to find some guidelines, that's fair. There is a solid chance we're going to be flying blind on trying to create guidelines here because most cities don't go down this path. And so that's not all. Most cities don't go down this path without that public improvement. But we will do our due diligence, and if that's what the council chooses for us to do.
Yeah, I second this because I thought it was necessary to have a discussion about it. But in my brain, seeing what's happened in the last 25 years, I just can't see how we could have guidelines that are strong enough that would prevent discriminatory suits. I mean, I don't even know what a guideline might, like Joe just said, a guideline might be. Maybe we just say all dental clinics get in for free, or maybe we say as long as they have $100,000 worth of charity work or whatever. But then we're setting up for, well, the people who are putting those guidelines together have got to think of 1,000 different things that could come down the path and how it's going to affect their guidelines. So, well, anyway, that's just my comment.
But that's what he's for.
Okay. And I mean, you guys have already discussed a significant number of guidelines that would be included, specifically the public improvement or a public service or a public good. And I mean, again, guidelines, I don't love putting guidelines into code or anything like that because the code's not for guidelines. The code's for saying what you do. But I think it would most likely be structured around an almost kind of factor-based thing where it's like the entity does provide a public service or has agreed to perform or construct a public improvement, and some other similar kind of criteria around those sorts of things. And then ultimately at the end of the day, what I think is going to most likely have to occur is in each time one is waived, probably have to develop some sort of form agreement between the city and the entity. So especially if we're into that public service, public improvement kind of category, because we're going to need something that actually says, no, you're going to do it. And if you don't do it, we get the fees back.
Yeah, but just think of churches, for instance, nonprofits. They
Yeah.
could say, well, we saved so many sinners from hell. But
Yeah, at churches, I also, just in my mind, there are a lot of very good not-for-profits, both local and national, but there's also a lot of new fledgling not-for-profits that maybe aren't going to be able to do some of the stuff that we're talking about right now, but they can maybe piece together the fees and just figure it out. And those are going to be the ones that are more typically run by younger people, typically run by people that don't have the same characteristics and maybe are part of one of those protected classes that the Salvation Army doesn't have to deal with, right? So that's kind of, at the end of the day, there is going to be something that states in there that the city council shall not make. or provide for the waiver or reimbursement of any fees in a discriminatory manner. Like that'll be in there. But that doesn't stop the discriminatory impact-based things. And you are correct with, for example, a church coming in and saying, I mean, the public service I provided was, we've been here for 50 years. Our congregation over that time has always averaged 100. So, and there's been 10,000 ex-parishioners that have passed away. I put 10,000 souls in heaven.
Yeah. Or we all go for bagels afterwards or whatever.
Donuts. I'm an after-church donut guy. But.
All right.
Well, I would just a question. If this passes to go with guidelines, then we aren't going to be able to make comments about this proposal.
Not the original motion, no.
Okay. Should I make those now or just wait until somebody else
You
makes
can't because
So
of-
it has, right now, guidelines, like what kind of guidelines would you want? And also whether or not it's a good idea to postpone.
you can't speak to the original motion, you can only speak to the motion to postpone. Go ahead.
All right, so since you said guidelines we may want, one of the things I would potentially be interested in is something for the betterment of the schools. I don't know how that gets looked at or written at or whatever, but I just want to throw that out there.
It's a great idea. A lot of cities try and do stuff like that. Unfortunately, whenever we enter into an agreement, it has to be for something within the purview of the city. And when it comes to public good, pretty much everything is, except for schools. Kansas City got sued for a cooperative agreement where they agreed to put brand new AC units on all of the schools that didn't have them in the KCMO Public School District. They got sued because that wasn't within their purview to provide AC units for schools, and they lost, and the school district had to repay the city for all the AC units. So when it comes to schools, we have to be very careful about what and how we're structuring it, because unfortunately, again, schools are not our purview. Now, sidewalks by schools are our purview, so we can get to something.
There you go. I like your thinking.
All right. Any other discussion on the motion to postpone? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Now, with that, since Andrea's not here, she's gonna ask a date.
Well, I mean, obviously no date for right now, but the intended goal I would believe would be the second meeting this month.
Okay.
It's just because it'll have to include this existing ordinance with the ordinance adopting the guidelines before it.
Okay. You understand that, Mary? Okay.
I love guidelines.
All right, where are we at? Motion to approving the first, I'm sorry, are you ready? I'll wait till you're ready. Motion approving the first reading of Bill 2024-13.
An ordinance approving the proposed fiscal year 2025 city budget as revised and appropriating funds from the revenues of the city.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. You're up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I won't take as long as Joe, I promise, unless we have questions. But tonight before you is the FY25 budget, and there are a couple of changes that I want to bring before you tonight. This has been a long process, and there's changes made to this probably daily, tweaks that are made, $500 here, a couple thousand there, and we did have some council requests that I want to bring to your attention tonight as well. So I'll just go through a quick list, and then we'll get to the approval of the first reading. So I had a council member request $10,000 for a homelessness committee, funding for that, and I think that was Councilmember White. We've got an addition of $27,500 for employee engagement. That's out of the general fund, and so will the $10,000 for the homelessness committee be out of the general fund. I've got an addition of $2,000 out of general fund for human resources, for a scanner, a printer, and some office chairs. Public Works, there was an error in their telephone expense, so we changed that to $7,080. These are little things, but I do want you to take note of these because when we handed out the line items to you guys last time, those are the changes that we're making. Also in general fund public works, an addition of $4,000 for office supplies. One of the additions that we made to the hotel motel economic development fund was $25,000 for a sports tourism study. That was requested by, I believe, Councilmember White as well. So we've got,
that wasn't the study, that was the performa, correct?
Yeah, it's the second phase of the study. The first phase was the market analysis. The second phase would be the pro forma, and it'd get into the details of to where and how to fund and how much it would generate and how much we'd be on the hook for, and essentially gets us to a go no go on whether we wanted to move forward with the project.
And that's what we delayed from last year.
We delayed it last year. We had the conversation last year, and we decided to delay as a council until the next fiscal year, and it was not in the original proposed, so that was making sure that it got in there.
Sorry.
oh, you're fine. In the street fund, there is an addition of $10,000 for sidewalk maintenance, making that line item $80,000. And I believe Councilmember Powell, you had requested some additional funds there, so we were able to do that. We've got some rollover in this budget. Fire, I've got a total of $230,116. That's where we are right now. That could change towards the end of the year, and we'll do those budget amendments in April. And police, I've got a total rollover of $314,604. And again, we'll do those amendments in April. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Go ahead.
That was quicker. Can you go over the piece of the sidewalks that was requested by the council? Didn't you just say there was some
Yes.
addition there?
So yes, so.
What was the number?
It's 80,000 total. There was 10,000 in addition.
Okay. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Greg, I'm sorry. With 80,000, what can we accomplish out of our, what is it, 400 million that we needed for this? So, I guess you can talk me through that a little bit.
So there's two parts to the money that's in there. We have 50,000 in there for cost share. So if someone wants to do work on their property and they pay half, we pay half, and so people can come in and ask us to do that work. The remaining money is just used for random sidewalk works, mainly the work that's on our property that we own. It's not on private property. I mean, adjoining homes. It's for fixing corners and other places like that that need work in town.
In that cost share program that we have, normally we have 10,000 set aside for that. Is that what I'm hearing?
No,
No.
we had 50,000 set
Oh,
aside.
that's what we normally have. So that wasn't an increase.
This is the second year since I've been here that we've put it back in place.
Okay.
The increase is 10,000, so it's 60 now.
Ah, I understand. I misunderstood original. Okay.
Go ahead.
On the 10,000 for the homeless, we need to specify that it's for the warming centers and cooling centers? Does that need to be specified, or just?
At this point, you don't necessarily need to specify that, no. I mean, and that's, as long as it's budgeted and that's also within spending authority, we can make sure that that's where it goes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What is the homeless committee going to use the $10,000 for?
We're expanding the warming and cooling centers. Right now, it's just currently the police department. And so we're expanding to other locations, and they need help with security, possibly buying some supplies and stuff to get some of them up and running.
Where are the other locations at?
One, his church,
No, it's not mine, but it's across the street here.
the
Heart and
church,
Hand
and then
and
also
Vox.
Heart and Hand.
Okay.
They also need things like cots, things that they don't have available at the police
So the
station.
money will go to them.
Well, it's just not going to be handed out. They say, "Oh, give us 5,000." I mean, they're going to have to demonstrate why.
Councilmember Rich.
I think has to do with security. A warming center doesn't necessarily have cots, but our church was concerned because of security. I mean, you've got somebody like me there, and 10 people at midnight are there getting warm. What if there's a fight that breaks out and that kind of stuff?
So are the current warming centers over capacity? We need more for that.
People don't want to go because it's the police department. So we've had a guy die already this year
Right.
because of the type of, or the lack of options other than the police department.
So who are you gonna hire for security? Yeah.
Or
Off-duty
private
police
security people.
officers.
You know, there are private securities.
Well, that's a good question. But 10,000
You're not
won't
gonna
go
I can't
recreate
hire
the same
anybody
thing.
if I don't have money, though.
Are you finished?
We're gonna hire you.
Are you finished?
At this moment.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to go back to my question about the public hearing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only way that residents knew that the public hearing was happening in the first place, because I didn't see it on the website, was in the newspaper, which, all apologies, Alan left, so I guess I don't have to apologize, but anyway, I don't know that everybody in Belton reads the newspaper, so, and particularly, even if you saw these numbers, there's no link to a website where you could go and ask. I mean, they could have asked us, or, council people, but, and I'll admit, nobody asked me, but I think it's gotta be a little more transparent to the public, and we might get at least one person come here and ask a question or even, comment about that, but that's for the future. That's just my
And we can
comment.
change that. In the
Yeah.
past, this is what has been published.
Yeah.
And in the public hearing, it does state to contact City Hall if you want a full budget to look at. Obviously, we can't put that in the paper. That would cost
Oh,
way
no,
too
no,
much.
no, no. But you're right. If you go to the website and just at the top, under questions, say public hearings, doesn't even mention it. So, I mean, there's a public hearing, it mentions one in the planning commission, it mentions one in someplace else, but it doesn't mention this one. And there's no link at all in there to the proposed budget. So, that's where people would go, I would think, if I was concerned about how much we're spending.
And we can definitely make that change.
Okay. Second thing is, how does the budget handle deferred projects? Like, there's a lot of money here, and there's stuff that we didn't finish or we're not going to finish by March 31st. So, how does that? Is that red flagged in there someplace?
So
I know
we-
Joe has offered to make a list, but how does it?
We will reappropriate those funds, and the 230,000 of fire and 314,000 of police that I mentioned just a little bit ago, those are rollovers. So we'll do a budget amendment in April and reappropriate those funds.
Okay, so you wait till the end of the year, and then if it's left over, then you can, it's allowed
Yeah,
to.
and some
roll
of
it over.
some of these capital, usually it's the capital purchases, and we will know ahead of time. Sometimes we don't know till the very end, and that's really because of COVID. I hate to blame everything on COVID,
right.
but ordering things,
Sure.
4 or 5 years ago, you could get a vehicle within a month now. I mean, I think John's waiting on an ambulance from 2 years ago or a year ago. So it's kind of hard to budget those big capital items, so we just reappropriate them with the budget amendment.
And would you expand on your comment here about?
The public hearing?
Noting the difference between the 19 million in here and the
Yes.
20 million.
So the public hearing went out, and I noticed that in 24's water budget was actually picked up in the formula instead of 25.
Oh, okay.
So actually, the total budget for 25, the public hearing, I believe, had 143 million, and our total budget's actually 141, so.
Okay. And you attributed my asking for $10,000 increase, but my ask was actually for $1 million. So I'm going to make a resolution, or I'm going to offer a resolution to take $1 million from the general fund reserves or the total budget reserves and spend it on sidewalk repair and construction during the 2025 budget year. Neither of these moves would take the reserves below 15%. In fact, it'll take the total down from 36 to 35, and it'll take the, if we do it totally in the general fund, it'd take it from, I think it's 25 to 23 or something like that. So we're way above the 15%. So that's my proposal.
So, Councilmember Powell, would that be a motion to amend Bill number 2024-13 to revise the fiscal year 2025 city budget by removing $1 million from the general fund reserve fund, which is line item?
Well, that would be a capital item. So,
Because we got to take it, because our code, so the code when you make amendments requires that you specifically state what line of the document you're changing.
Okay. Well, I got it right here.
And if we want to do it the right way, let's.
I think.
010 4400 495 7200.
Mary, did you get that?
Hold on, just give me 2 seconds.
Actually, this doesn't have the.
She has it.
Okay, great.
She's getting it. Give her a second.
Are we talking brand new sidewalks or improving sidewalks?
Both. I mean, I don't think any. Well, can we discuss this or we?
Well, I mean, we just need
We need to make the motion
We need to
first.
know what you're asking for so we can state it into a motion that complies with the rules.
Okay. Well, here. There's something called the capital improvement sales tax. It's 186% fund balance.
That is a different fund. You're talking about general fund, right?
Right. General fund. Let's just do general fund. Okay. General fund.
So we're removing $1 million from the general fund reserve
Mhm.
and placing it into the city's sidewalk capital improvement.
So how about we're
Line item?
going to appropriate $1 million out of this account line item, 010 4400 495 7300 for sidewalk improvement.
All right.
And I know you can do this just like that.
Wait a minute. We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
And a second. Go ahead.
Okay, so I know you can do it just like this. So, since we're removing that million, and he says that the fund balance won't go down very far, can you roughly tell us the difference in the fund balance percentage?
Well, I did the calculation before I came here, and the general is 28.83% fund balance now, and if you take $1 million out, and it's $7 million over, $7,513,000 cash balances. So out of those cash balances, now you'd have $6,513,438, or 25% of the revenues, the revenues.
I do want to say something. I don't want to
ahead.
get into a long discussion about this. However, yes, there is a cash balance in general fund, and that would take it down to 24.8. However, if you look at the total revenue and total expenses, even before that 1 million, there is not a balanced budget. We are going into cash reserves. So
Well, yeah, we have,
I would rather take some time and dig deeper and see if potentially capital improvement would be the place to take that from instead of general fund. If I could have just, I'm not gonna do it tonight, but just some time to maybe look at that, and potentially come back with an amendment in April, just a thought.
okay.
Can we
You
wait?
know best, you know best where we can take this hit, but I can just see from the city manager Warren's presentation last week and all this paper that there's a lot of money that we've got, and I know we got to be prepared for the worst,
Well,
but I
it's
don't
just-
see anything.
It's just that we want to get to the point where we have a balanced budget, and that is not the case. Yes, there is a cash reserve but it's depleting.
Okay, but the
So
total.
if you remember, so part of that revenue also is 1.031 transfer from capital improvement to general fund to cover general fund capital purchases. So if it weren't for that transfer, the fund balance would be even lower.
The total of all funds is $46,127,722. And we're talking about increasing sidewalks by 10,000. The one thing the thing that comes in the top 5 of all resident surveys, going from 46 million to 45 million to me is not hurting anybody, but except, I'm sorry, your calculations. I mean, I'm not saying your calculations are wrong, but if you want to preserve the most money for future balanced budgets, then you're right, that's taking a hit of $1 million, but.
Go ahead.
Rob, I appreciate your dogged determination to deliver on something residents want, and I appreciate you working towards a balanced budget. Greg, is it feasible that in the next fiscal year, we would have the ability to deliver on a project of $1 million worth of sidewalks or projects?
Go ahead.
Before we go too far down this path, previously at a meeting, we had a presentation about the need for sidewalks in the community. Obviously, the community wants the sidewalks. That's obviously the bedrock of the use tax campaign, essentially, or the impetus for asking for a use tax is to provide a revenue source for the city to adequately address the sidewalk issue. We have about a $250 million shortfall in what we need and what we would like to have as a community for sidewalks. And the flip side of this $1 million allocation, which kind of circumvented the entire budgeting process, it's a drop in the bucket, right? I mean, I mean, yes, we'll get some improved sidewalk from this for somebody, but it's out of a $250 million need, we're going to address 1 million of this, and we're going to take the whole process that we just went through for the last 5 months and circumvent it to do so. I think that's I mean, you all have the right to do that. I'm not trying to say you can't do that. I don't think that's in the best interest of our residents to budget that way in general. Just my 2 cents from the staff's perspective.
Can you answer her question, please?
So basically, the way we would spend the money would be to make repairs in front of people's homes, taking 1 square out at a time, and just start going through neighborhoods and doing that. We would not be in a position to be able to design and place sidewalk where there's not sidewalk today, especially considering, like in the presentations that we made, most of them require to have a storm system put in. And you'd have to build a storm system, then curbs, and then your sidewalk.
Thank you. That is helpful. And Rob, I appreciate that you presented this as sort of a contingency plan to, if the use tax doesn't come to fruition. Like, again, I appreciate your.
Well, I'm all for the use tax, and I hope to me, that means 2.5 instead of 1.5 to start.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's what I was going to say. We just literally went through this whole use tax using it for the sidewalks, and we are also working on the grant for the 80/20 for doing sidewalks, which would take the $1 million and do way more. I'd rather wait till we get that, the grant and the use tax passed. We'll get a lot more done. I want to follow up on Councilmember Lawson's question. So if the use tax passes, and if we get to that point, then we're presumably going to have money coming in, right? Is the plan for sidewalk improvement then like a year from now, when we have had the collection of that use tax over a year period, or since we don't sound like we're super ready to necessarily go move forward with that?
I'll answer that. Yes, essentially the next step, what our timeline was after the April election, assuming we have a revenue source, we prioritize that in a public way, right? We come up with a list of priorities and projects and try to figure out what are our top priorities as a city. And then we cut that into sections essentially so we can apply for these grants, get that 80-20 potential match, and have the most impact to where we're taking, $5 million and turning it into 5 times that.
Makes sense, because this weekend was a very busy weekend, and I received a lot of questions on sidewalks. And one of the things I heard repeatedly was about where will our priorities be there? And as you can imagine from people in my ward, they were like, hey, I don't want to hear it all going downtown because they already have sidewalks there. We don't even have them. So anyways, that was, thank you for clarifying that, because that was going to be a question I had anyways.
Go ahead.
Doesn't the budget have to be finalized before April 1st? So we can't wait till the April deadline.
We could make an amendment in April.
Yes.
Can we?
Yes.
And if it isn't approved, we just carry on with the current budget.
Okay.
But we really don't want to do that.
No, we don't.
We'd be violating our charter if we did that.
All right. Any more discussion on the motion to amend?
One quick thought.
Go ahead.
So if, on this motion, if we say to amend, you have to find the million. Is that
Yes.
correct? And so.
The way that the motion to amend is worded, which is what the city code requires for motions to amend, is we have to specifically identify what we're changing. If the motion passes, then the next ordinance that would be presented for the second reading would specifically have $1 million removed from the general fund reserve and placed into the capital improvement.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
And then at the next meeting, if that is read, then that'll be final unless amended later.
Let's clarify something, because words, language means something. So when you say capital improvement, there's a capital improvement fund, and then there's the general fund. So Councilmember Powell had talked about using general fund money for this, but then there's capital improvement as well. So we need to decide where we take the money from.
Well, didn't we already make the motion that it was coming from the general fund reserve account?
We did, but
That's the
There's a
motion on the
Okay,
floor.
okay.
That's the motion on the floor. Any more discussion on the motion to amend?
I want to make sure I understand that if we were to try to amend our budget after the budget's been passed, after we find out whether or not the use tax passes or not, that would be against city code?
no, we can do that.
Oh, I thought I heard, oh.
You can amend, the city council has the authority to amend the budget throughout the fiscal year.
In fact, we're going to have to amend the budget if the use tax passes and those funds, when they start coming in. And if we start spending them immediately, and it's a significant amount of money, we're going to have to amend the budget anyway.
So my whole thought on this is exactly Councilmember Lawson saw right through it, which was, hey, look, there's a contingency plan, right? Because this is something that has been asked. I literally got asked 4 different times this weekend about sidewalks. So with that in mind, it sounds like potentially waiting might be the way to go to find out if we, have a use tax being passed.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend?
So now I'm a little confused.
Go ahead.
So.
While we're
I
here,
gotta
go
come
ahead.
Here before someone yells at me.
Go ahead.
So if we're wanting to wait and see, then we have to vote no, correct?
Correct.
If we're wanting to guarantee the million, we have to vote yes.
Correct.
But can we reverse that if the use tax comes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you could.
Yeah.
And again,
Yes.
tonight's motion is just amending a first reading, so unless the city council does a second reading, you guys could change your mind by 2 weeks from now.
Oh.
And just
But
because
please-
we
but-
put it
but-
in the budget doesn't mean we have to spend it.
But I do believe the finance department would probably start pulling their hair out if they're continuously amending the budget over a 2-week time period. But again, to just synthesize everything, the city council has the authority to amend the budget following the April election when you will know whether or not the use tax passed. The city council can also amend the budget throughout the fiscal year to determine whether or not what funds need to go to where, especially if the use tax passes. That's not just a couple percentage points over what was budgeted. That's an entirely new tax, so.
Go ahead.
I would just say, Rob, I appreciate the way that you have put some pressure on this topic, but I would suggest we vote no to this specific motion because Casey has pointed out also that this might not be the best fund to pull from to do that. And I would like to give her some time to just look at the numbers and decide what would make more sense. So I'll be voting no, but I appreciate the intent here, and I think there are more options on the table now because of it.
Well, and I'm going to vote yes, but I just want to correct something. There was an insinuation someplace that maybe this was a last minute thing, but after the last meeting, there was it was an invitation to get your ideas in, and that weekend I sent my idea in. So, with no feedback to me, it got reduced by a factor of 100. Or maybe that's a factor of 1,000, I don't know, from 1 million to 10,000. So this is not something that's brand new just tonight.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend the budget as presented?
As presented?
As the motion, yeah.
Rob's motion.
Rob's motion,
Yeah,
motion to
yeah,
amend. Motion to amend.
That doesn't affect anything else that you've said. It just affects
No,
that
this is
1
just a
million.
motion to amend.
Yeah.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Yes?
Aye.
All against?
No.
Motion fails. Motion to amend fails, so we're back to the original motion. Any more discussion on the original motion? Go ahead.
So I appreciated you said that there's a lot of little things changing on the budget because I have a question about little things. Actually, it's probably more of a general philosophy question. So Joe, this might be more your wheelhouse, but generally speaking, there's different places within the budget where I saw that there was small increases on expenses that I would consider to be within our control. As an example, the printing budget would be something within our control, whereas insurance being increased is not something necessarily within our control. That's how I'm defining that. And so I saw one line item somewhere that was about 10,500 in 2024 going to 12,000 in 2025. So I know we're not talking about a huge amount, but again, small amount. So anyways, I noticed this a couple places within the budget, and I totally understand the planning philosophy behind there. It's better to be more conservative. If we don't use the money, great. Makes sense from a planning budget perspective. 100% on board with that mindset. But I'm curious internally, do we have goals or KPIs that are the opposite of that, right? Well, hopefully we're trying to stay at what we spent on those controllable items or less. So yeah, I'd love to hear the philosophy, Joe.
Yeah, the philosophies generally do not increase unless you have some added potential to utilize that. So if you have a different project or in addition to a service or making a service better, that's when we would want to go ahead and increase the budget on that. Does that make sense? Or if we found that the increase in cost to us has gone up enough that we need to have that increased capacity to provide the service we provided the previous year. Those are the two instances where we would allow an increase in a specific line item.
I get it. Postage goes up. We don't control that, right?
Yes.
Inflation happens out of our control.
Yes.
But I guess
add something to that? And one of the things one of the line items you probably looked at in the printing, utility bills. So I don't know how many permits Matt brought over a couple weeks ago. So we print our own utility bills, and that it gets pretty expensive to do that. So the more accounts we have, the more printing we're doing, toner we're buying. So all of those costs go up significantly.
Yeah, I guess like I said, my question is, I just want to make sure we internally have KPIs, goals, objectives, whatever you want to call them, right? Within the departments, our department is going, hey, here's our budget, here's what we spent last year, let's try to get under that.
Sure.
And I know it's pennies, but hey, that's how you make sure that's how you make sure you stay on a budget.
Don't increase unless we have a reason to increase, or unless we found our expenses are outpacing where we've budgeted in the past.
All right, thanks.
Go ahead, Councilman White.
So, I just want to know for sure what I'm voting for next. The changes that you mentioned, like the 10,000 more for street programs for the repair, 50/50, that's included in what we're voting for now, correct?
That's correct.
And homeless and all the other stuff?
That's correct.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The 10,000 for the homeless committee is in this. I
Correct.
would like to make a motion to remove the 10,000 for the homeless committee, as I'm not hearing enough for that.
We have a motion on the floor to amend.
Well, I mean, was that its own line item, or was that tucked into something else?
It's in a line item.
So this would be a motion to amend Bill 2024-13 to revise the fiscal year city budget by removing $10,000 from line item.
Adding. Did you say
No,
adding?
no, removing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, it's not there yet. I haven't added it yet.
Okay, removing from the appropriate line item, the $10,000 for use by the homelessness committee, and instead placing it into the general fund reserve.
And the line item is 010-1,400-3240.
So we have that motion to amend
second it.
on the floor, and we have a second. Does everybody understand the motion to amend? Any discussion on the motion to amend? Go ahead.
Chris, could I ask what more, like, what you felt was missing from the homelessness committee? We haven't discussed it really, so I was just hoping to be able to help get you more information.
So we're not knowing if the police station is over. They don't have enough. If there's too many people there, they're wanting the money for security at these churches where the police station, you're going to have the security.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've understood from a lot of the homeless people, you go out there and try to help them, and they don't want help.
So I can tell you on the police station, they typically probably do have more space, and Chief Lyons can back me up on this. I think they often have maybe 5-10 people max that kind of use it, is what we've talked about in our meetings. Am I along the same lines there?
Yes. I think the last time and count for homeless in Belton was about 15 to 20. But we know that number is higher because we know that they were staying during that period at other places. There's only 5 to 10 that we're using on a regular basis.
And then those of us who do work with the homeless population, we do know we have a lot more than just kind of what the point in time count says, because there's a lot of people that are either staying in their cars and then they don't count on the point in time. If they're in their car, they're considered housed. So we've got a lot of those, and then a lot that try to find someone's couch, that type of thing, to stay on when it is really cold. Sadly, we did have the one that passed away on a pretty cold night, and there are a lot that do say, and our guesstimates are that we'll have maybe 10 to 30-ish using it. So the idea of having to have two places is kind of, in my opinion, a little over at the moment, but having at least one place. And we've also discussed not necessarily it having to be kind of security as far as like hiring the police or something, but staff needs to be trained. It's not something as easy as just opening up your doors and saying you can come in and get warm. They have to have training as far as if it's an overnight thing, Do they have to have men and women separated? So do we have to have someone in 2 different rooms to monitor? You know, what to do if someone does bring drugs in. We've talked about having lockers and things like that for them to put items in so they're not bringing things into the building, things like that.
How many homeless do we have in Belton? Is there a count?
There's not. The point in time count is kind of the count. The point in time count, however, goes out on the coldest night of the year typically. And their reasoning behind that is because they feel like that gives a more accurate count. But it also has to do with funding issues. That if we have fewer, then the state has to provide less amount of money to help with the problem. The point in time count, I do believe, said we had 15. It wasn't a final number yet, but about 15 that were out on the streets that night that they did that. If you add on to that people that are staying in their vehicles, there's going to be a lot more. If you happen to go around like the GameStop Aldi's area, there's a lot of vehicles that park right there in that parking lot and stay there overnight. So there's those, and then the people that maybe weren't there that night because they got to stay on somebody's couch that evening because it was so cold.
Councilman White.
Police Chief, can I ask you a quick question? From your working with the Homeless Committee and the variety of agencies that have participated in this, do you see the need for more than the police station as as a warming center or cooling center?
Yes, we identified.
And do you see the need for us to have a line item of a minimum amount of money so that we can help with whatever needs those other warming centers and cooling centers would be?
That would be better for Joe, but
That's the discussion for the council, I believe. I wouldn't want to put the police chief in that position to try and take the sides on this, Mr. Councilman White, if you don't mind.
Well, no, I do mind, but that's.
I would much rather hear that we're going to use this money to help these people find jobs and get back on their feet.
Oh, that's the next step.
That's where I'm at.
That's the next step. You haven't heard that part yet.
And understand that they want help. So.
Go ahead, Councilman McCollum.
So I guess I have a couple questions. This 10,000, is this kind of like the committee now has the responsibility of this 10,000? They choose how they want to use it, or how does that work?
No, the 10,000 would be at the purview of the purchasing authority, most likely of myself. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
it
thank you for
wouldn't-
clarifying that. And then, so I know we have a couple liaisons to the committee here. And so is this a request from the committee, or is this a request from the council member?
Committee.
Okay. And then.
And I'm the chairman of the committee.
Okay. No, that's fine. I wanted to clarify if this was coming from the committee as a whole.
The committee did not specifically ask for that.
No, they didn't
It was
ask for
Councilman,
10,000.
right, it
They
was
asked for money.
Councilmember White. However, I do support that the committee will need funds to be able to do this. And then there's more steps in the making too, as we decided to focus on the most life or death situation first, which is warming and cooling centers, because that risks people's lives. And then taking it further from that, after being able to get that set up, and then doing some sort of transitional housing, things like that. Chris mentioning putting them to work, things like that. That stuff we already have. We're already doing that. West Central does that. Compass Health does that. There's lots of case management that does kind of help with that part.
Like, I know there's a need here. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to, but I guess I want to, I'm a little confused. So the committee got together and didn't say we want the money, or they did, or like, I'm confused on that part.
They've never specified an amount that
They
is
said
needed.
they needed money, and
Okay.
so I.
And then you came up with okay, I understand. I gotcha. And then, my only question, I guess the last one I have probably is, how did we get to that amount?
I looked at what security might be per hour. I looked at potentially buying a few cots, and that's how I came up with the $10,000. Because we're going to use it probably 3 weeks in the winter and 3 weeks in the summer
Okay.
for the warming and cooling center.
Well, to answer Council Richardson's question, I did go on the point in time from 4 p.m. to midnight on whenever it was, January 26th, I think, and came in contact with about 20 homeless people who were not sheltered. But I don't think that's the point of the getting extra warming and cooling. The point is, there's people that live in West Belton who, when it gets below zero, and it's not below 32, it's below zero as I understand it, they are out in the cold, and they're not going to be able to walk that far over to the police station and get warmed, or in that matter on a summer afternoon when it's 105 to get cooled. So it's to try to spread them out. Now you might say, well, okay, the two that you're talking about are right here in downtown, and unfortunately, I guess those are the only two that have volunteered so far. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be other non-profits, hopefully, that volunteer to do this, that spread them out in Ward 1, Ward 3, Ward 2, whatever.
That was an excellent point that you brought up, that the warming and cooling shelters are not just for homeless. We have a lot of senior citizens that cannot afford air conditioning and do not have air conditioning and need some place to go that would be safe for them. And then people that may, for some reason, have their gas shut off or have, their heater break in the middle of winter. This would not just be for homeless people, and that's part of the security help there too, so that people would feel safe to do this. And then we also mentioned the possibility of being able to split them up between different places. So like one would be a family center, as where one would be for single individual type things. So that way families would possibly feel safer using that.
I'll just add, I don't know if this is the first time oh no, I can't think of the word. I want to say council, but commission, is that the right word? I don't know, the group of people. I don't know if this is the first time. I can't imagine it's going to be the last. We have other commissions like the arts and tourism and lots of boards. That's the word I was looking for. So, I don't think it's a bad idea that we plan or think that that's going to happen. I think we might need to have maybe a better plan for the future, how we will hold that within the budget, because I'm not saying that this isn't a need, but I am a little concerned that we don't necessarily have like a concrete, like this is how we're gonna put the money forward. Not from you guys, I'm saying from a city perspective, it all kind of lies on Joe, which, is unfair, might not be the right word, but that's the best I can come up with right now.
Go ahead.
To piggyback on that idea, we do have things in the budget like the birthday celebration that we don't have spelled out what exactly things are going to be funded for. And in my opinion, to me, it's more important to have a warming, cooling shelter that saves lives than it is to have a birthday party on Main Street.
Anybody else on the motion to amend as presented? Hearing none, all in favor?
I haven't had a second.
Yeah, we do.
Who seconded it?
James.
Oh, I'm sorry, James.
We wouldn't have been talking if we didn't have a second.
I don't remember it.
All right, so let's do this again. All in favor?
Aye.
All against?
Aye.
Motion fails. So we're back to the original motion, 2024-13 as presented. Any more? Go ahead.
Okay, not to prolong this, but I have a backup plan. Since I didn't get the $1 million. I proposed, we mentioned the 50-50 plan.
You
And
don't propose, you make a...
I propose that the 50-50 plan be converted to an 80-20 plan, 80% on the city and 20% on the residents, in trying to spur some sidewalk repair.
The primary motion currently before the council is about the budget. The budget does not have anything to do with the 50-50, 80-20 split of funds.
I've been she mentioned it.
Well, yeah, because that's what they're budgeted for, the 50-50, but the 50-50 is set by a separate action of the council.
Save that for the first meeting in April.
So it would be, if you would like, it would be during council communications, you could make a motion directing city staff to amend the sidewalk matching program from a 50-50 matching program to an 80-20 matching program. Because,
Okay.
again, the budget, just so we're all clear, budget says where money goes.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say what the policy behind where the money goes is.
Oh,
From what I'm understanding, we could change that at any point.
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
Not right now.
Yes.
During maybe council,
Well, no, you could tell us to do something to then bring it back to you
I was
to
really
change.
simplifying, but yes.
Yeah. But so again, yeah, and again, it is an ordinance, so it'll take city staff drafting an ordinance to change it from a 50-50 to a 80-20 plan. But that can be something that is
okay.
done.
I stand corrected.
You
I
clear?
withdraw.
All right. Any other discussion on the motion that's on the floor, 2024-13 as presented? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 4, motion approving resolution 2024-26.
A resolution adopting a 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal years 2025 through 2029.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Who's up?
She should have never left.
You said you were going to take less time than Joe.
I don't know that that was my fault.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is.
So, before you tonight is the FY25 capital improvement plan. City staff is required to bring this to city council every year for improvement. This includes all of the capital items that we have presented to council. The past couple of months, we've been talking about this. So if anybody has any questions, I will take them at this time.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
To follow up on what you said, all of these are new items. There's nothing in here that's,
These are,
not that, it might be that you've remodeled half the kitchen with last year's fund and next year you're gonna do, but there's no, the money side is nothing carried over.
there's nothing new in here.
Gotcha. Or
And
everything's
this
in,
is,
yeah.
this is a capital improvement plan.
Mm-hmm.
These are suggestions that city staff has made for the next 5 years.
Uh-huh.
It will change next year.
Yeah.
This
okay.
is just a plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda, one motion non-debatable to approve recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I hate to do this to you all, but I would like to talk about number 3 and number 4.
Number 3 and number 4. All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor except for 3 and 4.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, motion approving resolution 2024-27.
Oh, second. Yeah, sorry.
We need
Do
a
we need
motion.
to-
We need a motion and a second.
Okay.
We did it.
All right. I didn't hear that. Did you get that? No, I did not. Motion, second. All right, you're up.
All right, so this will probably be really quick. Joe, so this is really valuable data, right? I've heard you talk about it many times. Is there some kind of city council report that we could get on about this data, maybe once a quarter or something like that?
I could make you as big or as small report as you want with this data, if you've ever looked at it.
Okay, so then
A lot of data that you could potentially pull. So if you give me something specific you would like us to consistently report, we'd be glad to do so.
all right, so then maybe this is an offline discussion. You and I can chat about what that can involve. Okay.
Of course.
That was literally all I wanted to bring up on this.
It's pretty impressive, in-depth software.
I had several questions about number 3 also.
Go ahead.
First of all, how's this data used?
Economic development. in a nutshell.
That's the main driver.
The main driver behind this data is it allows us to view the habits of people. First of all, we can see, like, for instance, we were able to ascertain that during the 150th celebration, we had,
Or 12,000.
10, 12,000 people in our downtown during that celebration, because Place Your AI collects all this data from tracking cell phones, and all the companies that track all that through their apps.
It's
and
probably better that you understand how it works, so sometime you're at City Hall, we can play with it and show you exactly what it
so
does.
essentially, it helps us to identify, for instance, like we could tell you, and we actually pulled the data from the previous discussion when we were discussing the dental clinic. We were able to say, okay, well, 90% of the people that go to the dental clinic comes directly from their house, from their home. That's data that they're able to track through this. And so you can see the spending habits and the travel habits of folks, not necessarily on specific items that they're spending, but on where they're going to the store and where they're coming from before they go to that store or any other location. So we've set up, for instance, locations for all of the cities, the parks and the golf course and things like that, so you can see where people are coming from when they go to the golf course and where they go after the golf course, same type of thing. Allows us to market better, allows us to identify what,
Take in mind, it's all raw data. There's no names or anything
Correct.
like that. It's all raw data.
So the main way it gets the data, though, is via phone area codes, correct?
It gets it through cell phone tracking.
Cell phone pings.
Okay, so that leads, does a call have to be made, or somebody
Nope.
has to open up their phone, or?
No.
So it's passive. I mean, as soon as as soon as somebody goes into the area that's being tracked, then they're counted.
Correct.
Until they leave the area.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, they're being counted all the time anyway, and this essentially
Your
just
phone's
accesses
always
that data.
pinging when it's on.
Okay.
So
I think-
your phone company always knows where you're at.
Boy,
So-
you could I could be wrong here, but I think the only way to override this is to completely turn off your location services, and then they would only be used for emergency stuff. But even then, I don't know how. That's why that's why I wanted to ask the question I asked. So
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's worth looking at, so whenever you're at City Hall, come by and we can throw it up on the screen and show
Well,
you.
I think it's a good program. I think it's necessary for economic development. I understand more about how it's used. It seems to me that so many people have different area codes. Like, I don't have a 816 or a 913.
That has nothing to do with it.
Well,
It has zero to do with it. It tracks physical location of phones.
Not
numbers.
I know. I know Excelsior Springs. I keep bringing them up. They always tout the fact that they have these festivals, and they say, well, we have people all over the country. We have people from California area codes, from New York area codes. And you're saying it doesn't
it'll show
collect that.
You come in one day and I can show you their festival. I can even pull their festival up.
Okay.
They say area codes. They're just saying that's locations, because it
So it's
tracks
just-
physically where people come from and where they go. It doesn't do it by their area code. It does it actually physically where that phone came from and where it went.
Okay, so it doesn't keep track of area codes.
No,
That's good.
not
That's
at
good
all.
to know.
Not at
Okay.
all. Not at
Okay.
all.
Thank you. I learned something.
Any other questions? You said you had a couple, is that?
Oh, that's it. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on item 3? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Item 4, motion approving resolution 2024-28.
present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
I didn't want to take that from you.
You're up. Go.
Okay, so this was a bit of a roller coaster ride for me when I went through and I read this one. So at first I was like, oh yeah, modest amount of $500. That seems like that's not that big of an amount. And then I looked at what he was actually paid, and then I said, oh, okay, well that's a lot more. That $500, that percentage-wise, that's a 20% increase. That's a big increase. And then I went, oh wait, he hasn't gotten an increase in 10 years, a decade. So then I went back to, okay, well maybe that is kind of a modest amount, 20%. That's 2% over those 10 years. So I'm not opposed to this idea, but ultimately, Joe, and I know you and I had talked a little bit about this. So where my question's going is, it appears as though he values his time at let's just say $150 an hour, because that was that extra rate, if you will. So just doing that math there quick based on the monthly pay comes out to about 20 hours per month of time we're getting from our prosecuting attorney. So my question is, do we feel that we're getting that much time, more than, less than?
If you put that at 5 hours a week, then I'd say yes, we're getting more time than 5 hours a week out of our prosecuting attorney, so we're probably getting a bargain.
Okay.
And there's not an attorney you're going to be able to find right now that'll take on that kind of work for $150 an hour. So
Yeah, I will say, in reviewing this and even talking to Bill, he is,
Can we pay Patrick $150 an hour?
for 5 hours instead of the 18, sure, sounds good. I'd already be at home. But Bill is, when the Bill Marshalls of the world, that kind of last group of prosecutors retire, you're not going to find anybody that's going to take on prosecution work like that at this amount. I do not do prosecution. You could not pay me to do prosecution.
That's why I wanted to start out by saying, like, the roller coaster ride that I went on as I read through this, I wanted to be clear. I'm not against the, overall. I just wanted to check that it made sense.
And the other positive about Bill, outside of that, he's been doing this for forever. One of the reasons why we're having to do this is because he's been the prosecutor for so long that at some point 30 years ago, they misplaced the ordinance that appointed him. So we're just going back and cleaning that up, or else he wouldn't have had to do any of this.
Okay.
So, and additionally, he's also the Raymore prosecutor. He is a prosecutor at several other cities. He is incredibly well known and is incredibly good at this. So,
thank you.
One of my favorite prosecutors that I work with.
Any other questions on item 4? You good? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, communication from City Council, you're up.
Honestly, I think I've talked enough tonight. The only thing I would remind people is that, again, absentee voting is open. Otherwise, I'm set.
Nothing.
Okay, some parks news and updates. I feel like every week I talk about, or every meeting I talk about the exciting new programming they've been doing, and that's going on still. This year, the Easter egg hunt will have 2 versions. There's the traditional one at Memorial Park on the ball fields with like 10,000 eggs spread out and just a crush of kids running to get them. But they're also offering an Easter egg dive at High Blue. It is $5. The other one is no cost, but it would be really fun and kind of piggyback on what fun it was for the cardboard boat race. There's also spring sports signups, the fishing derby. I believe this is the 3rd year for that. They need some summer help with camp counselors, and I'm sure probably lifeguards is usually a need around this time as they gear up for the outdoor pool. So for the community, if you're listening, there's lots of opportunities to get involved. And then we will see some plans for the Dryden Land Edition next month. So that's exciting too. That's all I have.
As it's getting nice out, I'd like to remind everyone, you do have to renew your golf cart and UTV tags. They are annual, and I didn't know that. Luckily, I did not find out the hard way. You do go through the entire process again. You simply call the non-emergency line and ask for an inspection. Then you go down to the police department and pay them $15, and you get a new tag for your buggy.
We did have the homelessness committee. I am pretty sure I said absolutely everything we've ever talked about in any of those meetings tonight, so I'm just going to stop there.
I don't have anything.
Ward 4 will be having a meeting on March 28th. I'm inviting the candidates for Ward 4 to come and talk. So I'd like for you all to come meet. And the place is still being discussed because of an event down here sponsored by the chamber. So I will get that posted as soon as we get that worked out.
All right, I don't have anything. Anybody else? You're up, City Manager.
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Item M, items for review and discussion. Item 1, hotel presentation. You're up.
Every year, the police department gives a presentation on the year
prior, the hotel motel tier program. As you know, the lodging establishment tier program was established by City Council in November of 2018. It establishes a process where we rate by tiers and have requirements of the owners and operators of those establishments based on their tier ratings. We look at calls for service in the ordinance, and that's during the calendar year. It's then divided by the number of calls for service, and the acronym for calls for service is CFS. And then we take that and we divide that call for service by the number of rooms for that establishment to figure out the ratio. Obviously, not every call that we look at is crime related, and therefore should not be considered when we calculate that ratio. And so those calls for service that we look at are, of course, the homicide, suicide, attempted suicide, sex offenses, robbery, burglary, larceny, disturbances, runaways, stolen autos, vandalism, child abuse, and then assists that we do for outside agencies such as DFS, Division of Family Services, harassment, trespass, disorderly conduct, fights, resisting and hindering police, abandoned autos, weapons offenses, threats, and bomb calls. One concern that was brought up when this ordinance was first being discussed was if those calls for service were generated by the ownership or the operators of those, we would consider those not in the ratio, and so we actually do not include those in the CFS ratio. The tier ratings, we have 3 of them, and they are less than 0.50 calls per room per year is tier 1. That is the level that we like all of them to be at. Tier 2 is 0.5 to 1 call for service per room per year, and more than 1 call for service per room per year is tier 3. When we conduct these tier ratings, we determine them, and then what we do is we notify the owners, and we do that based on the requirements. And like tier 1 requirements are that the operators would maintain a guest log per state statute, and they also make it available to us upon request, and that does come up from time to time when we're looking for someone that might have warrants in the parking lot, or we've picked up something regarding some kind of activity. We also ensure that they post registered sex offenders of permanent guests that are on the property of more than 30 days, and on occasion there are individuals that may stay 30 days or more at these establishments. Tier 2, we ask them to follow all the Tier 1 requirements. We ask them that they would have the owner-operator available on the premises at all times. Sometimes there are facilities that would not have somebody on site, and there's one of those that we'll talk about in a minute. We also ask them to install and operate digital surveillance recorder in the lobby, because that becomes important if we're trying to identify people coming and going or somebody in particular. We like for surveillance and a recorder of parking lots and indoor, outdoor common areas 24 hours a day, 7 days per week. Also install adequate lighting in those areas as needed for crime surveillance, for visual surveillance, or maybe crime prevention. And then we also ask that they retain that video for 30 days. Also in Tier 2, we ask them to obtain documents of guests, whether it's vehicle information, including make, model, color, and license plate number, and ensure that all guests are 18 years or older, and provide a government-issued ID. And so a lot of times those things are photocopied and kept with the information of who's in what room. Tier 3 requirements. This is where we have concerns about the establishment based on a high number of calls for service. We ask that they follow Tier 1 and 2. We ask that they provide dedicated on-site security staff from 6 p. to 6 a.m., 7 days a week. We also asked that they would provide the police chief, me, or a designee the names and contact information of all lodging establishment operators and security staff in case we have some kind of issue on the property. We can contact people even if they're not working that particular night. And then provide 24-hour per day, 7 days a week, front desk personnel. Some of these establishments have these, provide these, but these are not required until they hit Tier 3. Also in Tier 3, we asked them to maintain lighting in the lobby, parking lots, indoor and outdoor common areas. We asked them to ensure that there's parking passes are issued and recorded for all vehicles allowed to park in the premises, and that each pass be marked with a time that it's been issued and then the expiration date. That has become an issue in the past. We also ask that they maintain daily key or key logs, how many keys per room, if those any of those keys have been reported as missing, because this comes up from time to time. Also, we also asked them that they would ensure that all lodging establishment visitors sign in at the front desk, and those 18 or older provide government-issued IDs when they're presenting themselves as a visitor. We also asked that they ensure all lodging establishment visitors sign out at the front desk and leave the premises by 11 p.m. And then again, contact the police, the Belton police chief or designee to discuss opportunities for to prevent crime on the premises. And so that's one of the ways that we try to curtail issues on the properties and try to get them into Tier 2 and hopefully get them to Tier 1. Compliance. We ask that we send them a letter. We ask that within 90 days, we're going to make sure that they are in compliance from receipt of their tier classification, whether it's Tier 1, 2, or 3, the requirements, and we go out with the fire department and codes enforcement to look over the property within after that 90-day calendar period, and we try to evaluate them. Failure to comply. If they fail to comply, then I would issue them a letter, a written notice, and one of the things that can happen within there is that they would have to post that notice on the property openly, and usually that would be at the front door of the desk. Number 3, they have 30 days to come in compliance from the initial notice, and during that period, no new rentals of guest rooms can occur. And then after that 30-day period, a reinspection would take place, and hopefully at that point they would come into compliance, or we'd go right back into another 30-day period where they would not be able to have any new rentals. When we did the 2023 tier ratings, Dutchman's Inn, 610 North Scott, had 0.63 calls for service per room annually over that time period, and it is a Tier 2. Econo Lodge, 222 Peculiar Drive, was 0.76 calls for service. And then we had 3 Tier 1s, Fairfield Inn, 151 North Mullen Road, Hampton Inn, 16410 Cornerstone, and Quality Inn, 17205 South 71 Highway. And so, I would just for comparison, last year, in 2022, we had everybody in Tier 1, which was a good thing. And then in 2021, we had 1 in Tier 2, and that was Econo Lodge. And so that's our presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment, which is I appreciate the resources and time spent on this. I think it's a value added activity, so just appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, Second Street project.
Yes, staff is currently reviewing a rezoning and a preliminary development plan for the View project, which is proposed 11-lot single-family subdivision on 2nd Street between Herschel and Hackberry Streets. The zoning on the subject property would remain R2 two-family, but would add a PUD to it to accommodate the requested reductions in lot sizes, widths, and setbacks for a narrow lot single-family home product with a central amenity space. The redevelopment of the block would include street improvements, including on-street parking, curb and gutter, and sidewalks on all 3 street sides. And they've also agreed to repave the alley after all construction has been completed. A neighborhood meeting was held in February, at which about 15 residents attended to hear about the development proposal and discuss questions and concerns with the development team and staff. And this project is currently scheduled for the March 19th Planning Commission meeting. If there are any changes to that schedule, that will be noted on the March 19th agenda, which will be posted on Friday.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I know originally they said some of these were going to be 2 stories, and they've kind of changed it all to all 1 stories. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're all single story above grade, but they will have full basements.
Oh, they will.
Anybody else? Thank you. Number 3, Y Highway Marketplace 2.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The presentation this evening is regarding a request by council to bring back for discussion a possible amendment to the Y Highway Marketplace TIF. This is the TIF that currently houses the Price Chopper, as well as the car wash, the Arvest Bank, other place, as well as the smaller kind of inline retail shops. This was the original, kind of to give you an idea. We'll talk a little bit about some of the different project areas as we cover the history of it. This was prompted by a presentation from the owner, David Christie and the Christie Associates, asking to place a Valvoline there in the Project 3 area. Council had asked some questions at that presentation. The biggest hurdle in this right now is as part of the TIF contract and the TIF plan that is currently in place, automotive uses are not allowed. It specifically calls out a number of specific types of automotive uses that are not allowed within the TIF district itself. And so in order for that project to move forward, council would need to authorize an amendment to that Exhibit G as well as the TIF plan itself. And just for a little bit of context, and I think it's important to understand, the council has amended the TIF in the past. Going back to, so the TIF plan was first put in place in October of 2011. In March of 2012, that was the second amendment to the, again, like I mentioned, that Exhibit G. Council specifically called out and exempted national tire and battery retailers. So even though there was an automotive restriction within the TIF, they did call out, or the council at the time did call out the national tire and battery retailers. In 2012, April, the third amendment, this was just an amendment to the TIF regarding how bonds were to be issued by the owner. It was in the fourth amendment in March of 2016. The council did approve a non-sales tax generating, so the Arvest Bank. They did require the developer to pay $50,000 as part of that project development because it was a non-sales tax generating user. In 2014, 2016, the council extended the schedule. And then in 2017, kind of the final major amendment, this was an approval for a possible medical or another non-sales tax generating user. And again, the council put in place as part of the TIF that if it was going to be a non-sales tax generating user, there would be a requirement of a payment to the city of $50,000. The remaining 8th, 9th, and 10th amendments that the council has made to this TIF all were extensions of the schedule to where the developer had a required timetable built into the TIF. The council had extended those 3 times in 2018, 20, and 22. This is the specific property that the Christie's presentation covered. Just kind of wanted to give you, since the map was a little bit grainy, a little bit clearer aerial of the area we're looking at. Council at the time had asked if The market could support another Valvoline in this area or another oil change area, oil change business in this area. We can't really get into the specifics, nor can we share specific sales tax data from the current Valvoline or other oil change places, but I will make my plug for Placer AI. The data that you see here on your screen, this does indicate, this is the visitors by origin data from Placer AI for the current Valvoline that is located on 58 Highway closer to the Bel Ray, where we can see in the last 6 months, about 5,500 or just under a quarter of all visits to that Valvoline came from the Raymore area code. And then about 4,200 or 18.8% came from the Belton area code. And again, this data all coming directly from Placer from the last 6 months. Another question that had been asked during the presentation was, how many of the auto service stations do we currently have in Belton? Had community development put together a map showing where those current auto stations are located. The only thing we excluded was the convenience stores / gas stations. And so these truly are just the auto repair, tire businesses, and oil change locations that we currently have within the city. What staff is looking for, certainly happy to answer any questions. I believe Garrett with Christie Development is here tonight if you have any questions specifically about the development. But I'm also happy to answer any questions about the TIF amendment itself. And certainly I'm looking for direction from council on if we should bring the amendment for council for a vote.
Any question? Go ahead.
That exemption for NTB, is that still on the books?
It currently is, yes.
I'm not saying that they would, but if they came in and they wanted to put something into that and it fit, then we would have to go back and rescind an exemption if we didn't want it, right? Or
So again, the exemptions stem from a contract. So contracts and amendments to contracts, like what Mike was just discussing, take mutual agreement. So to rescind that is not a route. It's, you both have to mutually agree for that to no longer be a part of the contract anymore.
Okay, so it's still on the books. It's still a possibility. Okay.
Any other questions?
I mean,
Go ahead. You spoke first. Go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
Are they gonna have a meeting with the community over this proposal? I mean, we had it for other things, so.
So at this time, none is scheduled, and really the first step would be for council to look at whether or not we want to amend that TIF contract to start.
But yeah, certainly we can have them do a neighborhood meeting.
Yeah, but if we already approve it, then it wouldn't necessarily be worth
No.
hearing the community say they don't want it, but.
I would note, again, there's zoning in addition to this. If Matt can correct me, the development of this would require some zoning approvals.
It would only require a final development plan, so there would be no public hearings.
Go ahead.
My thoughts were on the community as well. I feel like we heard some pretty loud, pretty clear, maybe loud's not the right word, pretty clear pushback from the last time that something like this was put in, something almost identical. Look, I like Valvoline, I'll just be honest, I'm a user, okay? But I don't see this being a good idea or spot even for the community based on our past.
Go ahead.
Our other community forum meeting type things that we've had, like I remember the one and car stuff is not my language, the one right outside of Apple Valley, that was already going through zoning and stuff with approval when we had that meeting. Is that correct? As where this one hasn't gotten to that step yet.
So with both Take 5 and Express Oil, as well as Calver, those all had the C2 zoning district, which does allow auto repairs currently, which is the same case here. So none of those required any kind of rezonings that would initiate a public hearing. So they all were final development plans that go through Planning Commission without any public hearing requirement.
I feel like I remember like a community, and maybe it was something with traditions. There was a community forum that wasn't held on our part. It was done kind of by the developers to kind of try to work with community to work out a deal. Was that the traditions? Is that what I'm remembering?
That was the duplex.
There was one for the duplexes in
Okay.
traditions. I'm not aware of any neighborhood meetings, though, for any of the previously approved oil change businesses.
Okay.
Well, they're,
Go ahead.
Apple Valley, a lot of the residents did contact us, and did a lot of complaining about, and there wasn't a traffic study necessarily done, and they did a lot of the complaining about that. Now that it's there, we haven't heard much, or I haven't.
No, I haven't either. And I think
But
Matt's
the-
right. I don't think, even at the planning commission, I don't think, that was before your time, but I don't think there was a public hearing. There was a lot of discussion about it, and it was voted in 8-1, I think.
In part because it was already zoned for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and there wasn't much the community could do. So I have a lot of concerns that it's not out there for the community to give much feedback. You know, I'm supposed to represent Ward 4, and if Ward 4 doesn't want it, and it's in Ward 4, I have to vote no.
And so that it is zoned for it, but the difference is it's in a TIF as well.
That's
All the others weren't in a TIF,
Right. Yep.
Correct.
but they were zoned properly, so we really couldn't.
Right.
Anybody else? Go
When
ahead.
would you be bringing this back? Since right now, this is just, it's gonna come, is what you're saying.
Based on council direction, looking as to whether we bring the amendment before council for a vote. It's really just kind of what we're looking for tonight.
One last question.
Go ahead.
So like the NTBs, if we say yes to this, all future TIFs would be eligible for oil? No?
This would only amend this TIF
Okay,
for this instance.
okay.
Whenever the city utilizes incentives, there's the incentive, the TIF, the CID, the TDD. Then there's an additional contract with that actually says that the developer can get the money that is generated by those. And when you do those, each contract is different.
Okay.
Now, granted, the prohibited uses are not. The prohibited uses, the Exhibit E, the Exhibit E to every development agreement in the state has pretty much the same kind of 20.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Can we hear from,
Yeah? If you want to ask him some questions,
would
come
he
on up.
like to speak to the?
How's it going? My name's Garrett Fugate. I've worked with Dave Christie for about 4 years now. And I just want to, real briefly, so they showed the tire exemption. That was part of our reasoning for bringing this up is, you know, you have a tire shop, you have a lot, you have cars overnight, you have, in our opinion, it was a worse use of that space than a Valvoline. We'd already told Valvoline if we do this deal, if we get approvals, they have to up their development standard to fit the facade and everything of the development. They've gone to some hipped roofs, and we wanted it, so someone last time had asked about if they did, if electric cars took over, and I think that's not plausible because of our infrastructure, but if it did, we're making them build a retail-friendly building that would be able to be re-tenanted. The other thing, and really the biggest thing about this pad, it's restricted against some other high sales tax, chicken, for example, because Popeyes went in, and then, that's some of the biggest sales tax generators right now that are able to expand, and with Valvoline, we have another letter of intent from SWIG, which is a kind of a new concept out of Utah. They do fun drinks. They're really popular and coming to Kansas City, and they're a smaller user, and we think that we have the highest, basically, retail sales we can get with what we think Valvoline will do. over 2.5 million, and we think SWIG would do about 1.5. So we're, thinking we can get over $4 million of sales tax expense, generated items on a 0.85 acre pad. And then on top of that, and I think Dave mentioned this, but we did the other place, which should be open here hopefully really soon. But that was put on really a tier 2 pad, and I'm not losing any money on it, but I can promise you Dave is. And he did that, not for favor, but he did that to help the development and help the TIF, and that is not a good economic deal for him. So just wanted to mention that. Yeah.
All right, so if 60%, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
If 60% of the Valvoline over on, by Walmart.
Yeah.
Comes from Belton, so what will that do to that revenue if it goes to this one?
It wasn't 60%.
I thought it was at 60% of the revenue was from Belton, and what did you say the percent was?
25% was from Raymore.
Yeah, and then?
So it currently says 18 from Belton, but Valvoline has, I think, I don't want to misquote, but they have thousands of stores. They're not going to cannibalize themselves. They think they can grow their, substantially, and they wouldn't, just like any, same as Chick-fil-A or, any retailer, they have Placer AI, they have all these studies that show where they think they can pull from. Obviously, I would assume in this location, they're thinking they can pull a lot from Grandview, from some northern areas as well. But I can't speak to them. But they're not going to build a brand new store. They don't think they think it's going to underperform or hurt another store. I do know that.
By these numbers, I could see that less from Belton would go to that one, and it would come to this one, and we could get more from Raymore to come to this one because it wouldn't be so busy. So. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Mine isn't necessarily a question for you, it's a comment. I did speak to a lot of people in the last 2 weeks about the Valvoline. It was a hot topic from our last council meeting. And all of my citizens said absolutely no on another oil change place, Valvoline or otherwise. They do like the idea of SWIG. And a lot of them also pitched an idea of another type of fast food. I know David said that in the past, council had said no other, fast food. And I know we can't do chicken because Popeyes is there, but there's lots of other fast food possibilities that I think it sounds like our citizens are definitely wanting some more fast food on that side of town, because those of us who do live kind of on that west side, we have very few, like we can go to Sonic and Fazoli's. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we have to track all the way across 58, and anyone who's driven 58 knows we try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there on the fast food and we obviously have some pads on Gateway as well that we have been working on and plan to put, restaurants and QSRs there. It's hard right now. I'm just speaking in generalities, but it's hard right now. Obviously, those Gateway pads are really good pads. We have some of the best national retailers in the country behind them, and we still aren't getting, people busting down our door. Now, we are working on it, and I think in 2024, we will have some deals working on those pads and done. But those pads are better than the Y58, the pad in front of Costantino's, to be quite honest. They're bigger. A lot of them have better access. And so if we get a great fast food place, they're probably going to go there before they go across the street. So it is hard. And with SWIG, they don't need all that space, but we can't, make the pad even smaller because then it limits our future uses even more. So I'm just kind of explaining why we're at where we're at. And so if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm just going to say I do appreciate the explanation, and I do appreciate that, the work that Dave and the team have put into this kind of place. The only thing, look, I'm not in your business, so I'm not an expert by any means, but I would think that the other place, once it's finally open, would potentially create some more attraction to that site, I would hope and I would think, so.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. It's hard to speculate, obviously.
Yeah.
But we're really excited about them getting open, that's for sure. I'm sure the
So are
community is too. Yeah.
Anybody else? All right, thank you. All right, item 4, use tax presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This evening, wanted to just take a quick look at some of the items that have already been, I think, out in the community the last couple of weeks. If you've been looking at our Facebook page, you know, I believe it was this past week, we started posting things on our Facebook page and other social media outlets at your dais this evening. Also, you have each of you have packets with the postcards that have gone out for you if you wish to kind of distribute those as you are going out speaking to the community, as well as the 8.5 by 11 flyers. So those items have also been going out. This past month, our website went live, belton.org/use tax. We've created this really to try to explain two major things. One, really to answer the question of what is an online shopping use tax, but then two, also to explain where the revenues, if approved by voters, where they'll be placed going between the sidewalks as well as lowering of water bills. We know that hearing from residents and listening to their top priorities, those were two of the top priorities. And so we really tried to capture that information in all of our printed materials as well as videos that we've put together. And so I wanted to take a moment, or just kind of walk through the website. If I can get this to work here. Really just does a nice job. Our communications specialist put together the website to really make it easy to read, easy to understand, not just about the effect that the use tax passage would have for residents here in town, but also just even giving a quick explainer of how use tax revenues are collected from those out-of-state retailers, and also how just in general we've kind of gotten to this place where, by passage of the use tax at the state and county level. One of the other things I also wanted to highlight here on our website is our frequently asked questions. Our goal is to make this a user-friendly and kind of evolving website. So as you start to hear questions out there that maybe aren't directly addressed here on the website, or as we hear them through our social media channels, our goal is to kind of grow this list with more of those frequently asked questions, so that this would be a kind of one-stop shop for everyone who can come to the website, get those questions answered. Internally, we've also held some training sessions with staff, because we know that they're going to be stopped when they're out in the field, but also those that, are the front line on answering the phones or sitting at some of our customer service windows. We've got some important we've got an FAQ as well as other information in their hands, ultimately with the goal of they can be knowledgeable to answer questions about the use tax and the ballot issue, but also so that if maybe they don't know the answer, they know where to direct people. I'd like to, if possible, if you attended the kind of the Council 101 session, you got a chance to see the video that had been put together about the use tax. And so what I wanted to do is take a second and just show this video for those that might be watching at home as well. If I can.
On April 2nd, voters in Belton will have an opportunity to cast a vote to level the playing field for our community with a local online use tax. For more than a year, city leaders held town halls and sent surveys to learn your concerns. The top two? More sidewalks and less expensive water bills. To fund these priorities, Belton proposes an online shopping use tax on purchases from out-of-state stores and vendors. It would be equal to the city's current sales tax of 3.25% and only apply to non-Missouri stores who ship products directly to your home. If approved, shoppers would only be charged a sales tax or the online use tax, never both. The proposed online use tax would pave the way to funding more and better sidewalks by capturing millions of dollars that Belton is currently missing out on. The online use tax could also lower water bills by roughly $144 total per year for every customer, based on estimates. The proposed online use tax would be good for downtown too. Our local businesses currently operate at a disadvantage compared to online retailers like Amazon and Wayfair because residents already pay the state and county use tax and zero city sales tax on online purchases. On April 2nd, think about more and less. More sidewalks, less expensive water bills, and a brighter future for Belton.
So here at the very end, I just wanted to kind of point out that third point on there that, you know, the Chamber of Commerce as well as the Downtown Main Street organization came to the council specifically to request that this be placed on the ballot. I think it's important to point that out, that they also will be helping support some of the educational material as it goes out, as they also post through their social media channels. And I believe the Chamber is also in the process of scheduling a town hall where candidates as well as the information about the online shopping use tax can be discussed with residents, and we can again answer questions.
Go ahead.
Our Ward 4 last town hall, use tax was discussed, and most of the people were not very warm to the idea. But when the idea of developers buying items outside the state and then having it shipped to Belton to build their projects is not taxed. But under the use tax, it would be. Could you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the clearest example is, let's say you as an individual were to go to like Nebraska Furniture Mart, purchase something there and have it shipped to your house. You know, in that case, you know, the local sales tax would not be charged. With the passage of an online shopping use tax, that use tax would then be in effect because you're shopping out of state. Nebraska Furniture Mart doesn't have a presence here. You scale that up to those developers that are catalog shopping or shopping for their supplies and materials online. It's the same premise where they're not being charged that sales tax. With the passage of the online shopping use tax, that's where we would see that come into effect for those bigger developers as well.
Go ahead.
I also know that we are losing revenue because people are not shopping in our stores. And we can't necessarily know the exact amount. So the use tax is helping recoup the losses that we're achieving because our citizens are wanting better services. But the more and more money we lose because we can't tax them because they are not purchasing it here in Belton, the harder it becomes. And so that's why I understand that the use tax is designed for the two things that people really want most, water bills and sidewalks. And the only way to really do it well is to have some money generated specifically for that. So,
Anybody else? Go ahead.
So I mentioned this earlier, and so we can definitely just talk about this after what the wording is, but you asked if there's any other frequently asked questions, and I got asked twice this weekend about how we will be distributing, prioritizing, whatever word you want to use, that money specifically for sidewalks, right? I got asked that. So I know the answer is, hey, the council's gonna, well, you guys are gonna present us with a priority plan that council will approve. So it's fairly easy for me to answer, but it might be a good one for frequently asked questions.
And to kind of support that point, council member, we do on the website, when we highlight the sidewalk portion, we do have a copy of the report that council received during Greg's report to council about the sidewalk need. And so that report is on the website if anyone wants to if any of the members of the public want to take a look through that report to see not only the dollar figure of the need, but also the maps that were included as to kind of where some of those sidewalks both need maintenance, but also need just truly constructed.
Go ahead.
I feel like I should get some clarity on something Councilmember White just said because I've gotten this question before too. Our sales tax revenues have not actually shown a decline yet. There is truth to the issue that we are missing out on potential sales tax revenue, but by the budget, it's not that we're seeing declining sales tax revenue, correct?
Luckily, our commercial growth has outpaced the migration of spending habits online, and so we've been able to not notice that an actual decrease in our sales tax revenues because our growth is more than made up for it. if that makes any sense.
It does.
And so, but yeah, I mean, if you looked at our overall economic footprint and the percentage that we're getting, then you could probably make an argument there, but that's, I'm not an economist, so that'd be a difficult one to pull.
Go ahead.
One thing that MML and a lot of cities around the state kind of notice, especially cities that have the fortune of being growing and having a good commercial base like Belton has, is that while there weren't decreases, it had also not kept pace with what it could have and should have.
Yeah.
Especially because of, for example, the city of Belton. I mean, you guys added 2 400-unit apartment buildings this year. That's 800 more residents. You added traditions. You added all these things where in the 90s, if you guys added 3,000 people to the community, your sales tax would have grown significantly more than what we saw today.
I maintain that it is an eventuality for every Missouri city, and this is an opportunity for us to invest meaningfully in the things that matter to people now, and I hope it passes, but just wanted to clarify that.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item N, I'd entertain a motion to enter an executive session, discuss matters pertaining to legal actions according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.1 pertaining to leasing, purchase, sale of real estate according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.2 pertaining to negotiated contracts according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.12, and if the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
3 seconds.
Roll call.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Callum,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
and Kraft.
Aye.
Motion passes.